Hi, this is Kevin with Let Me Tech You, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over how to build an Azure home lab to help study or just grow your cloud career. Now, I did another video on how to do this with AWS, so I'm going to do this with a terraform and kind of show you how you can automate this whole process to help also save some money. So what we're going to do is you're going to need a Microsoft account. So what you can do is go to Portal, or you can actually just go where I'm at now. Just refresh this. So azure.microsoft.com. Go ahead and create a free account there. And once you get all that set up, then you can pause and we can get started. Then next, what you're going to need is you're going to want to also install the Azure CLI. And we're going to need this so that we can log in. So we can log in and be able to provision resources through Terraform. So we can just go ahead and go to Google and then just put in Azure CLI, and you should be able to click on the first one here and then pick your OS of choice. So I'm going to be going with Windows in this lab. So you basically just go ahead and then download the latest CLI and then go ahead and install that. And the next, we're going to need to install Terraform. So we're going to go to terraform.io. Now you can do all this manually, but learning it through Terraform can also enhance your cloud skills and infrastructure as code skills as well. So we're going to see a download option here. Pick your OS of choice again. And then once you get that downloaded, you're going to want to go ahead and save that. And what I did is I have a folder called Terraform, and then I also have a bin folder with the terraform.exe inside of there. And then once you get that set up, we're going to want to go into our environment variables under advanced system settings, and then you want to put the path to that exe in there. So if we go to, where's it at here? It should have been up here. Looks like it's gone. Let me look here. Sure it didn't get moved. System variables. So yeah, basically what we'll do is you'll just go hit new, and we'll variable name. Well, actually, to make it simpler, we'll go back to actually on my blog here. Let's go to letmetechyou.com. I have step-by-step directions on, let's see. Let's go here to this blog, and I believe I put it in. So no, we don't have it in that one. Let me double check in another one here. No, I think it was in the VPC one. How to create an AWS VPC using Terraform. Basically, the steps are kind of laid out. So setting up Terraform. It looks like I don't have it in there. Let me see. Okay, so yeah. So actually, I was looking in the wrong location. So in this path variable, you want to double click it and put it inside here. So had to remember that part there. So basically what this is going to allow you to do is type in the console just the word Terraform without having to put the path of where that's located at. So what I mean is, like, let me open up one of these command lines here, and if I put in Terraform, type enter, you can see it works without having me to put the path of where the exe is located at. So you just want to put the location of where your exe is in that path file. So once we go clear out of there, we're going to go back to, so once we get all that set up, you basically also want to have your own visual, your ID of choice. So whatever you use to basically write code in. So I'm using Visual Studio Code, and you can just download it from here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So once you get all that set up, now we're going to get into actually building our home lab. And what we're going to need to do is start with creating our folder. So go ahead and wherever you want on your computer, create a folder for this environment. And I'm going to call it, let's see here, I'm going to call it Terraform Azure. Terraform Azure. And then now I'm going to open up my Visual Studio Code. And once that comes up, I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to File, Open Folder, and look for my Terraform Azure folder. And then hit Select Folder. And then inside of that, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it main.tf. Now you need that .tf extension to be able to, because that's the Terraform's file extension for their files. So main.tf is just going to be where all of our code is going to sit at. You can do variables and outputs and things like that. You can check out some of the other blog articles on my blog that reference why those are needed, but we're going to keep it simple here. So when starting out, we're going to need to put in our Terraform block, and this is going to define our required providers. Required providers. And what we're going to be using, and where you can find this at, you can go to Azure, or not Azure, but terraform.io. You go to the registry, and you just look for the providers that you're going to be using. So we're going to be using Azure. We're going to go to their documentation. And as you can see here, this is where the required provider comes in at. So you can essentially copy this here. Copy that. And we can paste this in here like that. So this is saying Azure RM, source is HashiCorp, Azure RM, version is equal to 3.0.0. And that's defined based off of what version you want to put up here. So you can do version, anything that's equal or greater than or equal to, or whatever you want to do there. So we can actually go with the latest. So let's do 3.23. And then, so what we want to do is we need a resource group. So resource groups in Azure essentially allow you to combine multiple resources that share the same life cycle. So this resource group essentially just holds all the pieces of your environment together for various different reasons, whether it be certain projects, different departments, whatever. So we're going to call that resource, and it's going to be Azure RM. And you see how I'm getting like these drop downs. These are extensions you can download. There's a Terraform extension that you can download. I highly recommend that. Kind of helps out with certain things when you're trying to figure out what you need to do. So the Azure Resource Group is an actual, let me pull it up here. So if I come in and we look for resource group under the Azure provider, we're going to see this resource block, and it's doing some searching, and that should be under right here. It basically tells you what it is, some example usage, and basically your different arguments if there are any. So the region you want to put is going to be based off where you're actually utilizing the resources. So as you can see, it says West Europe. There's other regions. as you're actually building your environment out, it actually is nice to go into Azure and kind of walk through the initial steps. So what I'm going to do here is maybe later. So if you go to create a resource, and well, actually, let's go back here. Let's go to resource groups here. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me log into a different account here because this one doesn't have the free account set up. Okay, so I'm logged in and I'm on the create resource group part. And as you can see, these are the different regions here. Regions are specific parts of the world where the Azure data centers or Microsoft data centers sit that your resources would sit in. So I'm going to use East US here in my name. So I can add a name. I'm just going to call it Home Lab Resource Group. And then we're going to do name equals Home Lab. And then our location is going to be East US. And that's it. And we're going to, now I'm going to put another part here. And what this is basically going to be, so we're going to actually need to create our security groups. And a security group is going to essentially allow you to, it helps you define what ports and who's allowed to access your specific part of the network, depending on where they're at. So I'm going to allow us RDP inbound from anywhere on port 3389. So to do that, we're going to do a resource and then Azure RM _ network security group. So we're going to need a network security group. And if you don't know exactly what resource block you need, remember, always go into their documentation and just kind of type in what you're looking for. Now you can see, oh, okay, I need a network security group or a rule, different stuff like that. So you're not going to be able to remember all these. As over time, as you start to use some of them, you'll remember some of them just from always using them. So this name part here doesn't matter. It's just more of a way to kind of identify your different resources by a custom name that's local to your code. So inside of this, we're going to have a name equals, and I'll format this, and I'll show you a nice way to format this easily. We won't worry about the spaces and stuff yet. So name's going to be Home Lab Security Group, and then the location is going to be the Azure RM Resource Group, that Home Lab Resource Group in dot location. And what this is doing, it's actually taking this resource group, this name, and I'm grabbing the location, and that's where this network security group is going to lie. Then from there, the resource group name, and these arguments here that you're seeing are going to be grabbed from this documentation. So if we go into Azure Network Security Group, we're going to see there's ones that say optional and there's ones that's required. So we need resource group name, we need name, and we need location. All these other ones that are optional, there are other, like this is required. It just depends. So you got to kind of make sure whatever you're using, what attributes that you put in the required argument, or your code would fail when it starts to run. And let's go back here. And so we need our resource group name. We already have our name here, so let's grab it again. It's going to be Azure RM Resource Group .homelabrg.name. And now we need a security rule. So security rule. And this sometimes is what I don't like about the auto completion, because it puts in stuff you might not want. So I'm going to take out all of this. Okay, and then the value, so the name is going to be called, we're just going to name this allow inbound RDP access. Priority is 100. And a lot of this may not make sense to you now, but if it does, these are kind of how the rules are prioritized in the access list. Our protocol is going to be TCP. Our source address prefix is going to be any. Let's see, destination. Let me clear out. Let me just actually do these myself here. So direction. Let's see, why is it priority? Let's go. Direction equals inbound. Like to keep some stuff close to, and then access equals allow. And again, you can find a lot of these in here. So if I do a control find, I'll look for access. Here you got allow or deny. So it's more like a Boolean almost, true or false, whatever. You got direction, inbound, outbound. So make sure to come in here and find some of these things. Some of these things I already know just from, doing this, before. So now that we have that here, let's see what else. We don't need this. I'm not sure why. Direction, destination, port range. We need our port range. So let's see, destination, port range equals 3389. 3389 is the RDP port. And then let's do destination underscore address prefix. And we're just going to set this to any as well. Okay. So let me see if we're missing anything. We got name, we got priority, we got direction, access, we got the protocol, source port range. Oh yes, source port range. Source underscore equals any. Source address prefix, destination address prefix. Okay, I think we're all good there. So we got that set up. So that's just our security group. Now we're going to need to build our VNet. We're going to create our virtual network. And let's see, resource. It's going to be Azure RM. I think it's virtual network. Yep. The name for this is going to be homelab for VNet. And then again, we need our name. And again, these are from obviously the documentation. So name is going to be homelab VNet. It's going to be the name of the resource. Location, as you can see, you start to utilize a lot of these other things. Again, you just got to, that's where it's going to be located at. The resource group is going to be a part of, it's going to be the Azure RM resource group dot name, address space. So this is going to be the CIDR ranges that our VNet's going to be utilizing. So we got 10.0.0.0/16. So we're going to be using a /16 for this network. And then for our DNS servers, we're going to be utilizing 10.0.0.4 and 10.0.0.5. So now we got that set up. We're basically going to create our subnet inside of here. So subnet is going to equal, subnet. And if we go to Azure RM Virtual Network, let's see if we can find the Azure RM Virtual Network. So there should be, so you can see subnet being utilized. And typically you can come down and see what the subnet block supports. So name, address, security group. So we're just going to do name and address prefix for that. So the name is going to be whatever we want to call it. I'm going to call it just subnet1. And for the address prefix for this particular subnet, we need to utilize something that's going to be a part of this 10.0.0/16 range. So we're going to go with 10.0.0 or 10.0.1.0/24. So that's going to be for what that network is. And this environment, we're going to go tag. We're going to put a tag on it. Tags equals, then it's going to be environment. We're going to call it homelab. So now that we got the VNet set up, we got the virtual network that all of our resources will be housed in, as far as our virtual machine that we'll need to log into. Then next, once we get that set up, we need to create a public IP address and a network interface that we'll attach it to. Now the public IP address is going to be outputted on the screen once we finish up this lab, and I'll show you how we'll do that. So for a public IP address, you just need to do an Azure RM _ public IP. Let's give this a name, and it's going to be, let's going to just call it example here, just to kind of show you that the naming doesn't really matter at this point for that part, but it does in terms of like keeping your code kind of consistent. But there's really no what you should do is this right way. It's kind of more so what's good for your environment, what makes it kind of easier to keep things the right way as far as people being able to understand what you're doing. So the name is going to be homelab public IP. And as you can see, again, we're using the same resource group, location, there we go. And then we want to make this static and not dying. We don't want this changing. So static. And then tags again, we're just going to call this environment. And then, so environment. Okay, sometimes I get that spelled wrong. So basically tags just kind of like tag your resources to kind of, make things easily identifiable. For maybe different reasons, maybe billing purposes, stuff like that. So now our next resource group is going to be for our network interface for the virtual machine. So network _ interface. And we're going to call this example 2. And that just goes to show that you can utilize the same name for multiple things, and it's not going to affect anything. Basically, it's going to know based off what this resource group is, .example, whatever arguments you have in here. So, and we're going to copy this part here because I don't want to type that all out again. Okay, so the name, we're going to name this, and it's going to be Windows homelab NIC. It's going to be the NIC interface. I'm going to paste this in here. So this identifies again what resource group and location we're going to be putting this on. And then now we're going to get into our IP configuration. So this is where we then, put a name on this. This is going to be internal. Subnet ID. Now, this is where I left a small part out. So we need to figure out a way. So the ID is, we need to identify with this subnet. Well, the problem is we can't readily just go in and get we can't do an Azure RM virtual network .homelab vnet .subnet like it won't work that way. So what we need to do is we need to use what's called so basically if we Google it, I can make it a lot easier. So terraform data types. So types and values, data sources. Here we go. So data sources allow you to use information defined outside of Terraform or another separate Terraform configuration. So basically what we're doing is we're grabbing information from Azure to tell us what the ID is so that we can then apply it to the subnet. And I'll show you there's some examples in here. So let's see, data. So this is basically going to get the ID of this AMI. So data AWS underscore AMI ID equals var.aws underscore AMI.id. And then you can then output that to then utilize it in another part of your code. So as you can see here, this resource block is grabbing the AMI from this AWS underscore AMI.web.id. And it's also a nice way to kind of make your code dynamic too. Like if things change in another part of the environment or something outside of Terraform, you don't want stuff to kind of be too static. And then you have to go in and also change your code as well. So what we need is, I'm going to put it down here at the bottom, is you have to add so now that we have the subnet, we can do a data, and how do you find this as well? If you go to let's go back, see if we can get back into where we were at. Go back into the registry, and if we do a Azure, let's see here. Pull it up. So we're going to look for the Azure. We need the subnet. So underneath the data sources, should be able to find that here. Find it here. Data sources. Let's look at here. So subnet. Okay, here we go. So under data sources, this then gives you the example usage for how you would access information about an existing subnet within a virtual network. So now we need to go subnet. Then we're just going to call this example 2. And then in here, we're going to go name. And that's going to equal subnet 1. And we forgot. And then the virtual network name is going to be homelab network. So that's the name, that's the virtual network name we named up here. So we got that. And then the resource group name is going to be homelab, which is the name of the resource group. So we got this being pulled in, and then the output we need is the subnet ID, and the value for that is going to be data.address. azure rm subnet.example. So now we got our value here that's going to be outputted. So now we can go ahead and come back up to our resource group here for the Azure RM virtual network. And let's see where we at. So we got subnet ID. And so now we need to add in that data.azure.rm subnet.example, then .id. So we got Azure data .id. So now that's for the IP configuration. So we need to do a private IP address. Allocation is going to be dynamic. So this is just going to pull up a private private IP address from the 10.0.1.0 address range. Okay, and then our public IP address is going to be the Azure RM.public IP there that gets created. And .id. Okay. So now that we got all that set up, the only thing we need to do now is create our virtual machine. And I have a setup that I can already put together. And we can go, let's see, virtual machine. So let's see here. So this is saying the resource has been superseded by Linux, and so I guess we need to use these new ones here. So Azure RM Windows Virtual Machine. So as we can see, we are going to start right here. So we basically need all of this. And this is just going to do a simple 2016 data center server. I'm using this source image reference, create this disk, this password. Well, we've already used examples, so this might even help out a little bit with some of our naming stuff. So let me copy this into here. And let's see what needs to be changed here. So the name, that's fine, we can keep that. Resource group, we do need to change this because our resource group is homelab.rg name. And then this is homelab resource group .location. The size is fine. Let's see, network interface. We do have example. Yeah, we got example there, so that's fine. OS disk. Oh, that's good. Okay. So now that we got all that set up, we can go ahead and save this. And we need to open the terminal. And we're going to need to do so once you get the Azure CLI installed, you want to do what's called an AZ login. And this is just going to do an interactive login to be able to provision your resources for your environment. And this part should pop a screen. And I'm going to pause here because it's going to show some environment variables that I don't want to share on the screen here. Okay, so once it comes in, there's going to be a block of like code that's I guess you could say it's like JSON that's going to show up on your screen of like your tenant ID, all this other stuff. That's basically to indicate that you're logged in, because you're going to pick your environment on the previous screen there. So now that we got that set up, we can do what we need to do. We need to initialize our code here. So you want to do a terraform. Oh, actually, first, so to clean up all our formatting, we're going to do a terraform format. And as you can see, everything kind of gets formatted correctly in this file. And if you have other files, it would do that also. Then you want to do a terraform init. And what this is going to do is going to download the required providers, that particular version that we set. And once that finishes, then we'll be able to do a terraform plan. Just going to see if we have any errors or anything here. Incorrect attribute value type. Let's see. So on line 24. Oh, let me see. What's on line 24 here? Oh, you know what? I don't need that. Let's try that again. Let's see. So let's go look at this particular. See what we got wrong. Oop. So sometimes you just don't get it right. So you go to the documentation. Let's see, network security group. And let me see here. So network security group. Okay, so let's see what our rule. So we got security rule. Let's see, security rule equals, and what's it saying? Inappropriate value for attribute security rule set of object required. Let's see, so name. Let's see, priority, direction, access, protocol, source port range. Let's put some of these in order. Source port range, destination port range, just to make sure we got everything we need. Source address prefix and destination address prefix. So let's see. Let me save it. Maybe I didn't save it. Incorrect value, attribute value type. So let me look into this real quick. Okay, so I see what the problem is here. This equal sign, we don't need. Take that out. And let's try this again here. So looks like that's going to go through if it doesn't find any other little errors that we have to fix. And that's the great thing about the terraform plan. You essentially get any other problems that you're going to run into before you deploy your code. So let's give this another second here. And it's saying that data, let's see. It's saying subnet 1, virtual network name, homelab resource group was not found. Let me take a look at that here. So data, Azure RM, subnet, sample. That should be, let's see. That's fine. It's not going to be found because it's not created yet. So let's do a terraform apply. And I'm just going to do auto approve. And let's let it start building our configuration here. And I'm going to let this run through here. It's going to take a little bit of time to create everything. Okay, so what I had to do was, actually it did fail again. So I believe since the network, so that subnet's not created and we're trying to query it before it can even become, there's nothing up there. So what I'm going to do is put some I commented out this section of the code where it starts with network interface all the way down to the bottom. So I did a terraform plan, and now I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And this is going to start the building process. And then once that gets provisioned, I'm then going to go in and uncomment this other part that will allow me to grab the subnet ID to create our network interface. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this here, speed this up. So, okay, I wanted to backtrack on a statement I mentioned about commenting out portions of that code. What I realized was I actually had the virtual network name wrong. Just had to do a little digging. As you can see, my virtual network name is homelab VNet. I had homelab network, I believe it was, before I changed it. So now that I did the plan, it looks like it was successful there. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the apply and auto approve. Another thing that I added down here at the bottom, as you can see, is an Azure RM public IP. This public IP address is going to essentially allow it to output it here to the screen without me needing to go into the portal to see what it is. So once this adds it in here, our server should already be running. It's going to add these two outputs, or these two changes. And let's see if we can get what our outside IP address is here. And then we're going to open up RDP and then log into our homelab server. So let's see, it should finish here pretty quick. And I'm going to get RDP remote desktop set up. And it's looks like it's probably recreating the it was actually creating the network interface since we didn't create it the first time. So we go back to the terminal here. All right, so we got our public IP address. We're going to go ahead and copy that. Here, throw that in there. And we're going to get our username and password up here. So our username, admin user, that's easier to remember than this password. I'm going to copy that. Paste that in, admin user. Log us in, and there you go. You have your own virtual server in the cloud for your Azure homelab. And again, this may be a smaller instance, so it might be, a little slow, but you can configure all that in the terraform. So, as you continue to get better, just, make some changes and, apply it just to get things going and keep your knowledge growing. So now that we got all that set up, once we're done for it, we just want to do a terraform destroy and get rid of everything. And basically, this is going to delete everything that's in our environment. This is, just a test and dev environment just to kind of grow your skills. You don't want these things running constantly to rack up any bills that you don't need. So usually it's pretty cheap. Azure has some free resources that you can use for an allotment amount of time. Just depends on the sizing and stuff like that. So again, thanks for tuning in. I will also be putting a step-by-step direction of this on. Let's go to our website, which should already be up. I'm just going to be adding this video to the top of it there for anyone who wants to watch it rather than go through all these steps here. So you can actually get all the code that I've written from here. You might just need to do some formatting. So remember, I don't have this formatted. It may not be formatted correctly. So if you want, make sure to go in and do a terraform format whenever you get all your code set up. Again, thanks for tuning in and hope to see you next time.